Kate, before anybody, whether they're an executive or on leadership or on the front lines, begins to take a look at the tools and the chaos and the swirl and the shifting sands, isn't what are some thoughts around how, okay, there's so much that I can use. There's so much to do. There's so much, I'm not going to, you got me. I'm not going to predict the future, but I'm going to prepare for it. It seems like there's so much sameness out there. This tool, that tool, this thing. What do you recommend when you consult or when you speak or just, in your daily life? What do you do? Like, how do you distinguish or navigate what works for one?
Yeah. So the model that I introduce in What Matters Next is actually a very real model for me. Like the way I think about the world and the way I have learned to process information and make decisions. And I call it the now next continuum. And it really is this sense of, if you think about standing in the present and you can kind of look to, I guess it would be visually, it would be like you're to your right, like to your right. And that's
Right.
the past, right? Like you're sort of thinking along this timeline. Yeah, exactly. The past is over there. And when you look to the past, you can think about that as information that you know, right? It's known to you or it's
Yeah.
knowable, right? Like if you don't know, there are ways you can find out, right? Like there are resources, it's facts, it's reports, it's data, right? You can always look and know. But when you look to your left, where the future is, right? Along this timeline, exactly, that's the future over there. What we find is that we don't know anything, but what we can do is trace what we do know and sort of watch it take a trajectory, sort of a dashed through line into the future. And it gives us a sense what's likely to happen. And when
Right.
we start thinking about all those different scenarios, what we can do is ask ourselves objectively, what is the most likely thing to happen out of all these scenarios? And then what is the thing I would most like to see happen? And there is a gap between those two, most likely, right? If there isn't, then lucky you, because you're right in the sweet spot. But if there
Right.
is a
So
gap, which
just right
sorry, go
there
ahead.
in
Yeah.
layman's terms, here's the train, right? You talked about the through
Yeah.
line. So it's information. We're going to be informed by it. We're not going to be anchored by it. And you're
Hmm.
saying, we track it and here's what's highly likely or
Yes.
a high probability of what could happen.
Yes.
So before I miss this thought, may I intervene with one question
Yeah, of
ish,
course.
salad ish question? Um,
Sure.
because I don't want to, go outside of the vegan world. How do you reconcile that with an open, pure possibility where coming from nothing, you're informed by the past,
Yeah.
you see what you want to prepare for, but at the
Mhm.
same time, using your word, the creation, sometimes you come from nothing. So how do you reconcile that, or is that even a valid question in that
It's a
case?
valid question, but I'm gonna take it a couple different ways here. One of them is to say that you just allow for a possibility that something else happens that you can't anticipate. So that's one of
Okay,
the scenarios, right?
right.
Is just to say,
And
or
that
something else
requires
entirely.
a mindset, that requires some
Yeah.
mental fortitude, some management to hold the possibility of
Yeah.
possibilities coming. Okay.
Exactly. An openness, a curiosity, a willingness to say, something else might happen here. But you still would want to be able to say, there's probably some action or decision that I should be taking to ensure that the scenario I would like to see becomes the more likely scenario. I bring it more into fruition. So there are going to be, once I take this inventory of that whole space of the
Hmm.
future scenarios and I find that delta, I always call it the $1 million question is how can I close that gap
Right.
between what I see as my preferred future and the most likely future? And then you're influencing it every day with the decisions that you make and the actions that you take.